by counsel for Mr. Depp, but it's easier for me to just jump into this one. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
It says here, Amber, I described your plan to donate $3.5 million to ACLU over the next 10 years, as you very much believe in what they are doing. Now, the way in which donate is used here, how would you interpret that?
I would say that at the very least, it is expressing an intention to make that donation. And it's, by the term plan.
Okay. And would you distinguish between donate and pledge given the reference to the next 10 years?
About Elon Musk's intention?
I would read this to mean that it isn't clear whether this is intended to be a pledge, a legally binding pledge to create a receivable. This is something that I would want to, what I would hope would be a legally binding pledge, but I wouldn't necessarily say that this was.
All right. And the term donate here, how would you interpret that based on the description you gave a little earlier?
I would take donate to mean contributions from Ms. Heard.
And what, if any, interpretation would you have that this also meant pledge?
So two things in response to your question. One is plan to donate. When I said it would come from Ms. Heard, I would think that that would be either Ms. Heard directly or from a donor advised fund that she has set up and would recommend. But over the next 10 years makes me think that donate could theoretically be a pledge, but that's something that we would want to attempt to confirm.
And just so I understand, what's the difference between donate and pledge and how you are interpreting this?
If this used the word pledge instead, I would have more assurance that this was intended to be a hard and fast promise that even could potentially be a legally binding promise.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit Number 2. Do you recognize this document? Page 2632.
I do recognize this document.
And what is your understanding of what this is?
That this is the cover letter to which the check for $100,000 was attached, which related to Johnny Depp's contribution to the ACLU in the name of Amber Heard.
Now, you've used the term binding a few times here in responding to these. What is your distinction with the words pledge and donate that relates specifically to binding?
A pledge is, if something is legally binding, it is a pledge, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that uses the term pledge means something that's legally binding. Donate is a much, much broader term.
And donate can mean pledge?
Yeah, I think that the word donate can be used in connection with a pledge.
Do you have any understanding of what Amber Heard believed was a pledge versus a donation?
I don't know.
Did the ACLU have any reason to believe that Amber Heard would not pay the ACLU $3.5 million?
I think that everybody at the ACLU was hoping, the ACLU was hoping and expecting that the full $3.5 million would be paid to the ACLU. The fact that the pledge form wasn't signed cast some potential doubt on that. And then once Ms. Heard began having financial difficulties, we obviously recognized that might impact whether the full $3.5 million is paid or impact whether it's paid over a much longer period of time in some intermittent way.
Do you have any evidence to suggest that Amber Heard still does not intend to pay the ACLU the full $3.5 million?
I have based on my investigation, I'm not aware of any indication that Ms. Heard has decided to no longer pay additional amounts to the ACLU.
I'm going to ask you to bring up number 4, please. I'm going to ask you to take a look at this document, and it starts out on the bottom with Amber on October 17, 2016 to ARP, who's that?
That's Anthony Romero's private email, Anthony Romero Private.
All right, and she's telling him to go ahead and it's all right to cash Mr. Depp's check. Do you see that?
I do.
And then Mr. Romero responds to her, says, thank you for the response. We will cash the check. But that means you have, quote, overpaid for this year, as you wired $350,000 and then the $100,000 from Mr. Depp. So you can keep track that where you are on the overall amounts. Do you see that?
I do.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as deposition defendant's exhibit number 14, and it's base stamp ACLU 2588 through 89. This is, and I realize there was a version of this that Mr. Chu showed you, but this includes an email from Mr. Romero to Jonathan Moresco, and then Mr. Moresco to Mr. Romero with a copy to Mike Weir. And it says here, hi, Anthony, if you get a chance on Sunday, can you please check in with Amber on her next pledge payment? She has a balance of $2.55 million on her $350,000 10-year pledge. Below is a summary of her other payments. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And so this has the $500,000 and the $350,000 and the $100,000 on it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And that was September 28, 2018. I'm going to show you what has been marked as defendant's exhibit number 15. It's base stamp 2595, and I'm going to make it larger. And if I can show you, we have an email from Mr. Romero saying, is there anything I can do to help facilitate pledge payment of $350,000? And it's dated November 27, 2018. Do you see that?
I do.
All right. And then Amber comes back on 11/29 and says, hang on, I'll be right with you. You see that?
Correct. Yeah, I see it.
Okay. And then the $350,000 payment came in on December 11, 2018, correct?
Correct.
All right. And that made a total of what, 1.3 million, we've decided, right? What was the total amount of the donations after the 12/11/2018 that were made towards Ms. Heard's $3.5 million pledge to ACLU?
1.3 million.
All right. Now, if Ms. Heard had just given $350,000 each year, what would the amount have been as of December 2018?
1,550,000. It would be 350,000, 350,000, 350,000. So that's 1,050,000.
Okay. And so she was effectively 250,000 ahead of that as of December 2018, correct?
Objection.
After Mr. Depp filed suit against Amber Heard on March 1, 2019, what, if any, payments did Ms. Heard make to the ACLU towards her $3.5 million pledge?
No additional payments.
No, this was also shown to you by Mr. Chu on one of his documents. It's ACLU document 3037, the 12/11/2018 $350,000 designation donation from Amber Heard Anonymous. Do you see that?
I do.
Now, the ACLU continues to recognize Amber Heard as an ambassador for the ACLU. Is that correct?
We do. She continues to be listed on our website.
May a donor deduct a donation before they actually make the payment to the ACLU?
No. Yeah, a deduction cannot be taken prior to when the deduction is made. A deduction is taken with respect to a tax year, so the deduction would have to be made within a tax year in order for it to be deducted that year.
Okay. Now, you also testified earlier about different sources of donations, and you said that someone can make a donation in honor to fulfill someone else's pledge. Do you recall that testimony?
A person can make a donor in honor of someone else. And when I said in honor of a person, I was more referring to, in memory of a person or in honor of, a new executive director of an organization. People make donations in honor of them. But a person certainly can make a gift and say that I would like to make this gift to the organization because I know that this other person has committed something to the organization and I'd like to pay that amount. A person can do that.
Now, was it your understanding with the letter from Mr. White that Mr. Depp was making a $100,000 payment on behalf of Amber Heard towards her $3.5 million pledge?
Yes, that gift from was in connection with the amounts that Amber had said that she wanted to contribute to the organization.
All right, and it's been your testimony, I think, that there was an error in not including that in your sales force. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, is it also your understanding that Elon Musk made the $500,000 payment towards Amber Heard's $3.5 million pledge?
Yes, we don't know that with absolute certainty, but that is our organization's understanding.
Okay. And you credited it towards Ms. Heard's pledge, correct?
Yes.
Does it matter to the ACLU where it comes from if it's tagged and said it's as part of this person's pledge?
We're always happy to receive funds from donors, and if a donor is unable to make a contribution of an amount that they said they intended to make, if they're able to have someone else make a contribution to the organization, that's completely fine by us.
It's still more money to ACLU, correct?
Correct.
And it's towards a pledge that you're hoping you can count on, correct?
Toward a pledge in the weak form of it, which is that somebody's making an intention. It would not be able to be satisfied in connection with a legally binding pledge.
Well, you did credit the $500,000 towards Amber Heard's pledge, correct?
Yes, we did.
And although you didn't initially credit the $100,000 payment by Mr. Depp towards her pledge, you agree that that should have been credited towards Amber Heard's pledge as well, correct?
Correct.
Now, we saw a document that Mr. Chu showed you a short while ago that indicated that Elon Musk made some other significant contributions, including $1 million and $5 million that were separate and apart from the $500,000, correct? Is that
correct?
Okay. Now, Mr. Chu asked you if the ACLU benefited from the fact that Amber Heard pledged or donated the $3.5 million. And I think your answer was that you benefit, whenever there's donations made and the publicity associated with it. What, if any, benefit would the ACLU have had if Amber Heard pledged or donated $1.3 million as opposed to $3.5 million?
If I understand your question correctly, I think that it is always a positive thing to report on donations made to the ACLU.
Mr. Dougherty, you testified to a number of documents about the op-ed and the back and forth with the attorneys and everything else. Are you aware of any evidence at any stage of the op-ed drafts through publication that Amber Heard did not rely on her counsel's advice?
From what I know, Ms. Heard involved her attorneys and made changes to the op-ed based on the advice of her attorneys.
And so my question is, are you aware of any evidence that would suggest that Amber Heard did not rely on the advice of her attorneys?
Based on my investigation, I'm not aware of a situation where she did not rely on her attorneys.
Thank you. And I'm going to make a reference to their exhibit number 31. This is, it's just called Exhibit 31, and Mr. Chu put it down. Jerry Johnson was writing an email, and he listed a number of topics. Was it your understanding that the ACLU chose a number of those topics, of course, subject to Amber's